I work for the UN-CDF as a financial inclusion expert, and I will be your moderator for today. And before we start, I would like to introduce Helen Gradstein, who is the head of the Digital Finance for Resilience program in the Caribbean, to do the opening remarks. So Helen, over to you.
Hi, Annie. Thanks so much. And good morning, everybody, all the esteemed guests. I'm very happy to see you today. So today I'm delighted to welcome you all to this important webinar on the formation of a Caribbean Digital Finance Alliance. And I certainly want to extend a warm welcome to our distinguished participants, including the EU, leaders from digital finance alliances from around the world, representation from regional policymakers, fintechs who are both on the call and in the audience. It's great to see you. Of course, one of our core counterparts, the TTIFC, who helps us to make these webinars a reality. The OECS, our counterpart and direct government agency that facilitates our work in the ECCU, our UN-CDF colleagues, and our global audience joining us online. Thanks, and it's great to see everyone. So this webinar is brought to you by the EU and UN-CDF Digital Finance for Resilience program, which is implemented across the Eastern Caribbean and funded by the EU being one of the largest donors of development programs in the region. And at the UN-CDF, and as part of our EU-UN-CDF program, we are very proud of our achievements across the region, supporting enabling regulations, helping to create a more enabling digital finance ecosystem, designing payment infrastructures, national strategies, and we believe we've been instrumental in the region developing, in essence, many digital finance and digital economy agendas across the Eastern Caribbean. In addition, the UN-CDF is unique within the UN system in its ability to provide blended finance directly to the private sector. And this capability has allowed us to develop a very specialized expertise in creating a digital finance ecosystem, or in essence, the enabling ecosystem to empower digital finance and digital services to come to underserved communities. And that brings us to this webinar. And from our perspective, in order to create a thriving and inclusive ecosystem, it's very imperative that non-banks are able to operate efficiently and effectively within the financial sector. Around the world, and the reason why this is so important is that we've seen non-banks tend to serve those who are more vulnerable or more excluded in the community, and they leverage technology well to do so. For instance, leveraging mobile money or establishing QR code technology. There's all of these different tech services that can be enabled by non-banks to reach customers with cheaper, more affordable, effective, and faster services. So enabling non-banks and fintechs to thrive makes for a strong financial sector. And as the global financial regulatory landscape evolves, it's important that the financial sector remains inclusive and also adapts accordingly, especially for these fintechs and new entrants. And to do this, it's very important that the voice of fintechs is very well heard. So today, we're fortunate to have the opportunity to learn from experts in this field who help to amplify the voice of different fintechs and non-banks to serve this sector, and who have led alliances that amplify the voice of digital finance firms worldwide. And so, as such, we're going to be discussing the formation or the potential formation of Caribbean Digital Finance Alliance, which may have the opportunity to enhance collaboration and accelerate progress, building upon the existing alliances and groups that have been established at the national level, but advocating at a regional level for better regulations, prioritizing some of the issues that might be the most cutting and greatest need across the region, and enhancing the collaboration, accelerating progress as well. So we're joined by an esteemed panel of international experts and local industry leaders, who I'm sure my colleague Annie will introduce, who will also share their insights and experience and help us envision how this can be a reality across in the Caribbean. So it's my pleasure to hand back over to Annie to lead us through this webinar, our technical expert at the UN-CDF. And I thank you all for your participation, and I very much look forward to the insights and the productive session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hélène. That's very well said. Let me move this slide. Well, yeah, so as we start, I just wanted to remind the audience of the context in the Caribbean. So 2 weeks ago, I believe, we did a soft launch of our working paper, and I presented the highlights of our research over the past several years. The working paper is called No MSMEs Left Behind, the imperative for e-commerce and digital economies in the Caribbean. So the working paper is there. You can see the link. Maybe I can ask my colleague to paste the link in the chat. But essentially, we're still looking for case studies to integrate into the working paper, and we're still looking for feedback. So please, if you have the chance to read it. But essentially, there's a huge market available for Caribbean products and services, but we're not able to access it because we don't have access to digital payments. Just taking tourism as an example, we experienced 7 years of consecutive growth in arrivals just before the pandemic. So in 2019, we had 50 million visitors to the Caribbean region. But in the meantime, the GDP growth per capita has been declining for 4 decades in the region. So what's happening? We have more people coming to our region every year, but we're not, who's really benefiting from it? So the problem is really that MSMEs, which represents 90% of all firms in the Caribbean region, are not integrated into the digital economy. So to integrate the digital economy, MSMEs need access to digital payments. And based on our research, we found that 80% of MSMEs at the moment do not use digital payments to process transactions. Also, 75%, the vast majority, do not have access to a bank account. So what do? They operate their business using their personal bank account or using a credit union account. I have nothing against the credit union, but it's just that to manage a business, sometimes it's difficult because the businesses don't have access to the different digital network. And then another important point to mention is that about 10 to 20% of the population are completely excluded from the formal financial systems. So all these, the root causes of the problem and the potential solutions are presented in the working paper. So I'm not going to go through it today because that's not the point. The point is that we need to work together, the public sector, the private sector, and the development sector. We need to work together. And that's the purpose of today's session. We need to establish a Caribbean Digital Finance Alliance for inclusion of individuals as well as MSMEs in the region. So what's a digital finance alliance? Essentially, it's a collection of it's a collective and organized body that represents the interests of fintech companies and stakeholders involved in the digital finance sector. So really the purpose of the Digital Finance Alliance is to do all kinds like advocacy, industry collaboration, capacity building. So there are different things that these alliances do. And the UNCDF, we've seen it working in other countries, and we've seen the impact these Digital Finance Alliance has on the development, on inclusion. So that's why we are willing to support the effort. And then right now we have a call for nominations that is open because we need to create an executive committee. The executive committee essentially would be responsible for establishing the constitution of the alliance. And we're looking for about like 5 or more industry champions, a diversity of age, experience, knowledge. So if you are interested, or if you know someone who has the right profile for this executive committee, we encourage you to fill the form. The nomination link is here. So I would ask Sadat, my colleague, or Edward, if you can paste it into the chat so that people can fill the form. So I'll stop here. And because we are now interested in hearing from the experience of those who have done it, and we're also interested in hearing the perspective of the Caribbean industry leaders. So we have an amazing panel, starting with Sarah, who is the CEO of the Digital Finance and FinTech Association. So this is an institution that supports the establishment of digital finance alliances in each country. Then we will hear from William Kunda, and I'm really honored to have him with us because he's leading a digital finance alliance in Malawi. So we'll hear firsthand experience from the private sector. And then we have Bram Peters, who is the mastermind behind the Digital Finance for Resilience program in the ACP countries, Asia, Caribbean, Pacific. So he has also seen and supported this Digital Finance Alliance. And on the Caribbean side, we have Imran Williams, who is the manager of the Multi-Million Digital Transformation Program in the OACS. He supports multiple governments, so he knows, perhaps the potential benefits and challenges of such an alliance in the region. And then we have 2 industry leaders, in the space, working for fintech. Mark founded the Z Labs in Trinidad and Tobago, and Martin founded Penny Pinch in St. Lucia. So I'll stop here and I'll start with Sarah. Sarah, if you want to give us a little bit more background about the Alliance of Digital Finance and FinTech Association, and give us an idea of why do you believe that these Digital Finance Alliance are so powerful at the national level and in our context, perhaps at the regional level. So over to you.
Thank you so much, Annie, and thank you everybody for being here and listening. It's great to be part of this conversation. I'm very excited for the plans that seem to be in place for the Caribbean. So firstly, let me really give you an idea of what associations are all about. So associations are predominantly there to give their members a collective voice. And what we recognized working with a number of associations since 2018 is that there's nobody giving the voice to the associations themselves. So that was partly why we formed Alliance of Digital Finance and FinTech Associations, is actually to be a global collective voice of digital finance and fintech associations, raise their profile and raise the work and what they can actually achieve. So we have also got a particular focus on responsible and inclusive finance as well. So all of our members have, sort of make sure that the products and services that are coming to their market are responsible and inclusive, as well as being innovative too. So what we do is Alliance DFA, because we've got a very long name and that's our abbreviation to make it easier for everyone to keep saying. So at Alliance DFA, we do three key things. Firstly, as you said in introduction, Annie, we capacitate our member associations. So indeed, a little while ago, I was with William in Malawi, helping them through establishing and forming their associations. So we have papers and best practices for associations, and are constantly encouraging all of our members to be able to learn and understand how to run a sustainable and impactful association. The other key thing we do is catalyze collaborations between the associations themselves, but also with other external partners. And I'll give you some examples of those in just a second. And lastly, we lead. We try and lead on the industry and listen to what challenges our members are facing. So one of the challenges that we heard a lot of our African-based FinTech Association members speaking about earlier this year was cloud computing. And the challenges of data localization laws and regulation and electricity on being able to actually use cloud computing well, and that to allow fintechs to expand to operate across multiple countries. So we just released a paper on Friday on that. I'll put the link in the chat for anybody that might be interested in that one as well. So let me just give you, and I've got a few examples from all over the world of the different types of things that associations can do. We identified about 8 key factors that the majority of our associations are delivering. So firstly, let me introduce you all to AFTEC in Indonesia. They are supporting the regulator there to run the regulatory sandbox. So only members of AFTEC, as the FinTech Association, can access that sandbox. And it is a way that the regulators are helping support the association and vice versa to make sure that the good and well-established fintechs are actually going through the sandbox. They're also working with Women's World Banking to identify gender gaps in the fintech sector, both in terms of people that work at the fintechs and run fintechs, but also usage by women as well. Staying in Asia, we've got the FinTech Alliance Philippines as our member. They've just run a campaign on highlighting scams, which is a significant issue affecting, well, I think everybody across the globe, to be honest, but they ran a campaign with the central bank to highlight some of the issues to the general public. And they were also the first industry association who created an industry-initiated code of ethics and conduct in Asia. So that helps manage members. Heading across to Africa, we have the FinTech Association on Botswana. They are currently building a scam radar, like a website for consumers to be able to go to as well. So again, you can see scams are a familiar thing coming up amongst our members, and it's a piece of work we'll continue to do as the Alliance going forwards. Heading back across to Asia, we have FinTech Association for Consumer Empowerment in India. They partnered with Google to remove illegal lending apps from Google's Play Store, so protecting consumers from harm from those illegal lending apps, and they continue to do that going forward. So a great example there of private sector collaboration. The FinTech Association of Mozambique is on the steering committee and supervisory body for the national financial inclusion strategy for the country. So they are actively contributing to those conversations, making sure that any sort of regulatory work as a result of that is supportive and inclusive for FinTech. And they're also leading deliverables on that program as well around digital payment solutions. Of course, one of the key things that many of the associations do is FinTech weeks and events. So we've got Intersect coming up in Australia, and Mongolia FinTech Week happening as well. And, they are important events to promote the FinTechs, attract investment, and also support networking amongst the industry. We know that anecdotally, often, networking happens and people tend to collaborate. Even mergers and acquisitions happen often as a result from a chance meeting at one of these kind of industry events. There's a lot of capacity building and working groups that run as well. So FINASA in South Africa are running one at the moment on payments. And they've also been doing some policy advocacy work there, supporting the acknowledgement of cryptocurrency as a legal currency in South Africa. And finally, to give you a couple more examples from Africa, DFA Uganda and DFP Ghana, two of our associations, have been advocating against mobile money taxation, which has been something that we see more and more creeping in across different jurisdictions. So I hope this gives you an idea of the kind of activities and impact that associations can make and we see them as market facilitators and ecosystem builders. They can play a phenomenal role in bringing together regulators, sort of private sector, public sector, and also linking really nicely with the development sector, such as the partnership with UNCDF, to really stimulate the market, bring people together and solve the problems that are keeping really financial exclusion and making it challenging for the industry to operate. So I hope that sets the scene and look forward to contributing to other questions as they come up.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you very much. And now, Bram, if you can also share with us, what do you see the benefits of a digital finance alliance at the national level or at the regional level?
No, thanks, Annie, for that question. I think, many of let's say benefits have already been, let's say, shared by Sarah, and I think she goes across the globe, as you heard, in Asia, in Africa, and I think so. I'll try to add a little bit to that without let's say being repetitive, but I think. One or many of the elements that were mentioned already by Sarah are elements such as the ability to represent as an industry and advocate. So you have one collective voice as an industry to influence government policies and regulations. I'll come back to that point a little bit later, particularly on the regional aspect, because I think we have some interesting examples, for instance, from the Pacific, where also small island context, where I think there are certain examples or initiatives ongoing where I think if an association is established in the Caribbean, that they can be replicated, or at least there are lessons learned from it. But examples, I'll share some links in the chat after I've finished my speech or my talking. But we've been working with Ethiopia and Malawi already to a large extent, and they actually have gone through like what used to be, say, more or less formal groups, and sometimes even I dare say that they operated more or less almost as a WhatsApp group, where industry connections were formed really just in a WhatsApp group, and then now more and more we've supported them, and actually they've become a formalized association. But in the case of Ethiopia, for instance, they have, after they've started an association, then they organized networking and collaboration meetings. They call them FinTech mixers, whereby each of the members organize a meeting with a different theme, and can be on let's say digital payments, or maybe consumer protection, or any other topic that is relevant for the industry at that point in time. And I think these are really nice examples of what can be done also in the Caribbean context. Obviously, I do want to highlight some of the challenges as well, because we from those examples that I just mentioned, but also in a country like Gabon, where we're going through a similar process at the moment, is what we've noticed as well is that sometimes, yeah, you're not only peers as an industry, but you're also competitors. So it's really interesting for us to come in as a, say, as a UN, we'll carry our UN flag, so to say, to be really an honest and independent broker to bring people together, and we are needed to grease the wheels and provide some budget to actually get yourself established, get you connected with other associations and other organizations such as the one from Sarah. And I think that's the role what I think we should be playing, and that we aim to play also in the Caribbean. Over to you, Annie. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. I do have a lot of questions, follow-up questions, but let's hear from William first. William, we want to hear from you because you've experienced it on the ground from Malawi. So if you can explain how you did it and how it is going at the moment, and what results you have come in practice, what results have you already been able to achieve with the Alliance? So over to you.
Thank you, Annie. And thank you all for the opportunity to talk to you. Indeed, for our association, we have had a longer period of setup. I don't wish this to happen to the Caribbeans, because you now have lessons and places where you can come and learn from what we have done. We started our journey, you won't believe it, in around 2011. So it's been a long period. So we started as a mobile money coordinating group, where it was the only mobile money operators that were meeting. And then a year later, the stakeholder group was widened, and then banks joined in. That's the time I came to join into the group. Then we evolved, we changed our name from Mobile Money Coordinating Group to Digital Financial Services Coordinating Group. So as a group, we kept on discussing, meeting, influencing a number of policies. During this period, we saw the country legislating the Payments Act, the transactional regulations, and many other regulations. And all these were influenced, and the participation of the group was very paramount. In fact, most of the drafting of what went into the legislations and the act itself, the group was actively involved. We were just a loose group meeting and discussing and influencing, but we noticed that we were recognized even at that stage. Then around 2018, we decided to register as an association. So we have a firm mandate by the government that we can be a group they can recognize. But our attempt in 2018 didn't go far. We failed, and I'm not ashamed that we failed, because there are lessons there that we learned. And then come 2022, just after COVID period, we reassembled. And this time around, we decided that we will even expand further. Prior, we didn't have like the insurance association as part of us. We didn't have the ICT association as part of us. Then we incorporated them as part of a wider now further group. And then we moved now further and successfully registered our association in 2023, with the final approval coming early 2024. But despite that, we were still working in the background. We still had a number of influence that we have exerted on the market itself. So the way we are composed, we are looking at individuals as our members. So these are people that are certified practitioners. They've done their education, and others are practicing in the area of DFS. That's you become our member if you are part of that. Then we have financial services institutions. These are banks, MMOs, microfinance institutions, insurance, and switch. These are part of our association. We have network providers. These are mobile network providers and data network providers. We have technology companies, fintechs, and we also have the ICT association in there. Then we have government. These are ministries and departments that are interested in or are directly linked to digital financial services. We have regulators. So we have our central bank and the other policy makers and the communication regulator also in there. Then finally, we have development partners. These are the likes of USAID, UNCDF, and many thanks to UNCDF for putting us together and having this type of grouping as what we would call now an association. During the pathway, we have learned quite a number of things which I would want to share. First is it's not easy to bring diverse groups together. We've managed, and we are still looking at how best we can achieve coherency. There was a comment area that it's difficult to bring competitors together on the table. As you might have seen the composition of our association, you wonder that the competitors are sitting at the same table and agreeing on a number of things. So one of the lessons that I've learned from this is there's need for team spirit. We need to work as a team. We can't achieve things if we are alone. To facilitate transactions, you need consumers, merchants, businesses, and governments to be together. And if they don't work as a team, this cannot be achieved. The second lesson is to remain resolute. Once the goal has been set that this is where we want to go, as a team, you need to remain resolute to make sure that you achieve it. The third point that I have learned is to remain committed. It takes commitment to go through all this period. I was the team leader through and through. I was the team leader at some point, left, went to do something, came back into the grouping, and each one of us who was coming and driving it was committed to making sure that something is needed. Then the other lesson is failure is just a delayed success. If we failed to register in 2018, we were hampered by issues of finance. We didn't have money, we didn't have support, but we took that as something that has just happened, and it's a delay. We'll achieve it anyway. And if you experience that you fail, don't lose heart. It's just a delayed success. Reattempt to go on. Then the last point I've learned is please have a listening partner. You need a partner who can hold your hand in difficult times and lift your morale when the goal can't be achieved. And we have had the UNCDF with us and other partners, USAID and others, who have encouraged us, who have put us together, even in difficult times. So have a partner, and I'm pleased that UNCDF is here. If UNCDF, you can replicate what you did to us in other places, I will be pretty much happy. What have we done so far? We've done quite a lot, as I hinted. We've influenced registration. We have influenced regulation. Right now, we are actively participating in financial literacy. We just had a study which has been released a few weeks ago, and in that study, there is some gaps in financial literacy, and we would like to fill up that gap. So we are working together with the government of Malawi that are driving this, and we'll go throughout the whole country trying to preach the literacy, financial literacy on different aspects of DFS. That's the stage at which we are, and we think that in the next few years, we would have achieved most of our goals. Maybe I can stop there for now. Thank you.
Yes, William, but I'm not like gonna let you go. I have just wanted to clarify something because you've mentioned a lot of different stakeholders that are members of the association. But what I wanted to hear is how is the executive committee or board of directors created or established? So are all these stakeholders members of the like having a voice in the decision making? So you say it's important to establish goals, but who is responsible for establishing the goals? The executive committee? And is there a distinction between the executive committee and the board of directors? I would like if you can explain a little bit more about the leadership structure of the association.
So right now what we have is the executive committee and a representative of the members that I've mentioned.
So one representative of each stakeholder as part of the executive committee.
Yes, at least one is there. In some cases, we've got two. Like from government, we've got several, but likely because they have different departments that are interested in what we do. But in other departments, we've got two but a maximum of two representatives in the committee. Above that, we have got the board. The board was appointed, so it was through the nominations of the executive committee that appointed the board. So the board is responsible for the strategic direction and other requirements that the board will do, while the executive committee is the one that does the running and making sure that programs and projects are being implemented.
Mm-hmm. And the board of directors is, you said that the members are appointed based on their skills or based on who they represent?
No, it's based on their skills and what they can contribute to the cause of DFS.
Mm-hmm. Very well. Okay, so then I'll move on to, I don't know if you have also Bram, since we're on the leadership structure, Bram and Sarah, if you have comments on the leadership structure as well, because one of the things that our fintech are highly concerned about in the Caribbean in particular is that the power structure, right? If you have a board of directors that involves banks, are they gonna have, you know, like more power and pressure on decision making and on the setting up the strategy, the direction of the board of directors, so of the association? So I would like to hear your experience on the leadership structure, both of you. And I'll start with you, Bram, since I have you.
Well, maybe I think, Sarah, you have seen many more associations, so you're probably more equipped than I am in that case. But I'll let you come, and then I'll come in with some examples of maybe from my observations in other multi-country contexts, because I think that will be likely the case in the Caribbean, where we need to have representation from multiple countries and probably multiple different sectors. So I think that I can chime in there. But Sarah?
Sure. I mean, I think one of the it is tricky dealing. I think there's two things that you're dealing with when you're setting up associations. One can be ego, personal ego, which can trip people up as well. So sort of feeling that the association belongs to you. And I've seen that happen in others. I think the other is there's too many people around the table. And I remember when I met William, and I remember sort of walking into Malawi thinking, my goodness, how can this possibly work? There's 25 people here who are all going to have different agendas. But actually, what was really clear is that the team were committed to working together and also trying to find the common areas of pain points. And I think that's that's a big, easy way to do a quick win at the beginning, really, is trying to find that area, digital financial literacy, that's not necessarily going to benefit one competitor over another. There are things that you can pick that, that perhaps to tackle on and work with first, that gain people's trust and gain some momentum. And I think, when we were looking in Malawi's case, the board itself, there's definitely representation in the membership, but you cannot have every single organization, every single entity, possibly, even every single country, if you're looking, at a regional association on the board. Trying to find a process where people can nominate who they would like to go on the board. And then there's also some sort of selection process based on skills and knowledge to make sure that you end up with a board that everybody feels like they kind of can sign up to, that represents them in some way, shape or form. I think is going to be, and having that board, I've seen people with boards of 20 people. A board is not functional when it's like that. You're looking, but under 10 people really to run a board well. And I think it's also really worth remembering that there can be multiple working groups, and I know this was a conversation. You can have different works. You can have a payments working group. You can have an insurance working group. You can have even a fintech, a working group or one, so that there can be different places for people to have their voice heard and be part of the strategic direction of the association, either through the working groups, or through being on the board. But I think it's really important to manage expectation. That there was luckily no expectation that every bank and every MMO or, every fintech were going to have a seat on the board in Malawi, because it becomes, impossible to do that. So, picking people that people can have trust in, I think, that's also an important, you want your board to be experienced individuals who understand the ecosystem, the environment, and quite often you'll find people that are very familiar with multiple sectors. It's very few people that have only got the experience in just one funnel anyway. So those kind of multi-expert people, perhaps people that worked at banks for many years and then started their own fintech, or was in, a central bank for a long time and then went and, did the private sector. People like that have got those multiple hats can make really good board candidates and champions. So I think trying to be clear on the outset that, the board will never be able to seat everybody, but there will be opportunities for everybody to be heard, to be listened to. I think that is a good way to go about it. Bram, I'll hand back to you.
Yeah, thanks for those insights. I think and probably some of you will ask, like, why is Bram so often making reference to the Pacific? I used to work in the Pacific, and hence, I probably come up with examples which I believe are probably relevant to Caribbean context as well, talking about small island countries. I think there are lessons to be learned from associations, or let's say, in the case of some of the examples that I've seen working quite well in the Pacific, and these are not necessarily related to digital finance, but let's say on tourism, there is like an umbrella organization on tourism in the Pacific, and well established, running for many years, where each of the country level organizations that are representing each of their countries, but then are members in that umbrella. Equally for private sector, that one is PIPSO, that was, top of my head, established I think in mid 2000s, if I'm not mistaken. Also, again, with support from development partners to get them up and going, and with support from regional political bodies. So I think, and I'm my apologies if I don't know all the necessary details to advise on what will work or not in the Caribbean, but I think there are definitely a lot of lessons learned from other parts of the world, and there's no need to make mistakes that they have already made. So and if you feel like I want to learn from them, then by all means do reach out to us. We have connections there, and to connect you, and if needed, set up meetings and do introductions. Over.
Very good. Thank you so much, Bram. So let's hear from them. Let's hear from our Caribbean stakeholders to hear what they see the benefits for us as such an association is for the Caribbean region. And also, I mean, I also had another question for you to share some best practices in terms of the financial model to sustain the alliance. But I want to hear first from them what their perspectives are, and also from them, what is it that they want to hear from you, most importantly. So let me start with Imran Williams, who works in the OACS countries. Imran, can you turn on your camera and give us your perspective, please?
Hi, pleasant morning, everyone. I've been listening keenly while the panelists have been discussing the same. In terms of the need for such an association is clear for the sub-region. And I always start off by saying, while you look at the ECCU, all members of the same currency union, the stage of advancement in terms of the use of digital tools are diverse, like literally at the opposite ends of the spectrum, where you can go to one territory and certain businesses will say we accept bitcoins as payment, and you go to another in a different territory and they say we only accept cash payments. That's the extremes of the spectrum in and of itself as it stands right now in terms of means for facilitating payment. So, and one of the reasons for the far end of the spectrum in terms of only accepting cash is a lot of those entities only have, how to put it, there's still a great deal of aversion to the use of the digital tools, either fear of security where it comes to your data privacy, whether it's cyber attacks, whatever the case may be, or sometimes when you drill down at it, it comes back to just a lack of understanding of, in some instances, how robust those very tools can be. And when you juxtapose that to what happens in terms of physical space, in terms of using cash and going to the bank, the same kind of risk that you face, then you realize that it's sometimes a misunderstanding. So especially when you look at it this way in terms of the advocacy role of the Digital Association, I think it's critically needed, certainly. Suffice to say, perhaps the one keg in the wheel is that, of course, working across jurisdictions, you can well imagine working in one country has its own challenges. So working across jurisdiction in ECC where you have 8, so put those challenges times 8. It doesn't mean we don't have success stories in several other projects. I mean, the Commission is a testament to that in and of itself, even more than just the 8 members of the currency union. We do have success stories and other models that have worked on the regional level that we can follow the pattern. The question for me, what I didn't get from the panel thus far, perhaps I put it back there. Well, I've already established there is the need for it, given the diversity, given the stages we are, the mixed stages. And I always try to tell persons, for me, I like to think things through from a futuristic perspective. What do I want things to look like 5 years from now? Where do I want the people to be intellectually? What's the penetration levels I want in terms of internet, the usage, in terms of data, financial inclusion, etc. And then now to determine what do I need to do to get to that point. That's the way I try to look at it. I'm not necessary to say to the country that's moving too fast, slow down, while you say to the other one that's moving slow, you need to speed up. You establish what the final goal looks like. It's not a race, but if someone is advanced, you just say, these are the other 5 steps you're missing to get to this kind of utopia point, if you want to call it that. And for the country starting at 0, you may very well have 10, 15 steps to go through. And that's fine. That's totally fine. The idea is to establish a goal and not necessarily to rush who gets to the goal first. What I'm trying to understand, I'm trying to think of, in everything in the sub-region, you can well imagine with the movement, there is a financing model to underpin it. I'm trying to get a sense, is the association from your end, is it a full-time exercise? If it's not, how is it financed? Where do you get the funding from? Is it that donor funding for facilitating the advocacy? Sometimes training that may be required, bringing persons together. If you need certain skills that's beyond the association itself, how do you co-opt that skills? Maybe you need a digital strategy for the sub-region, better understanding, a roadmap on the financial inclusion. That kind of financing model, how do you go about it? That's what I didn't get quite clear.
Yeah.
Some clarity.
Very well. Thank you so much, Imran. Moving on to Mark. Can we hear from you?
Thank you, Annie. Yeah, I mean, if there's one thing we can start to get going is to get as much members that the association that William mentioned on and the diversity of the members on a board. I think that's great in terms of the types of organizations that we need to include in the Caribbean Digital Financial Alliance. And it's been really awesome to hear from Sarah and Bram in terms of the experience, because it echoes through, I think, a lot with what we need in the Caribbean. And if I was to state why this is so important for the Caribbean, especially with UNCDF leading and moving it forward, is that UNCDF creates this sort of pseudo sandbox, an umbrella per se, that allows public and private sectors to really liaise and workshop and collaborate. And I haven't seen an organization that's enabled fintechs to do so across the Caribbean so effectively that the UNCDF has been able to do to date with such effectiveness. I would even go to say that more effectiveness than local associations. Controversial statement, but it's the type of effectiveness that we've seen will also allow us to scale. And I think that's a major importance in the Caribbean. Is to innovate, we need to scale, and to scale, we need to go across the Caribbean. And to go across the Caribbean and innovate, we need to collaborate. So like Martin and myself are both building mobile money wallets. Have also been in the blockchain ecosystem at the pioneering end of the Ethereum ecosystem, when we were creating standards and we were blockchain wallets who were competing and collaborating. And out of that competition and collaboration came a unified protocol where all wallets could talk together. And I think with that experience, what I learned from there is what I would really like to bring to this ecosystem is how do we bring that type of innovation that I've seen in the blockchain ecosystem to the Caribbean? Because the blockchain ecosystem is very collaborative, and everyone wins when you raise the tide together. And I think that analogy of tides is standard. So if we can start to collaborate on that, I think it's a big one. And capacity in terms of like networking events and mixers, getting people in rooms together, not just in board conversations, but opening up the ecosystem to new players through these mixer events, a massive one. So Bram, like really great shares there in terms of the mixer meetings, and leveraging the spaces that we do have across the Caribbean, the physical spaces like the TTIFCs and this co-working space that we're in here. Will allow more people to enter through the space and be educated about the alliance. So great points in terms of what we're hearing here, and we're in full support from our side in terms of increasing capacity as well. So I think underpinning, my last point really would be capacity is a huge one. We can build capacity through collaboration, but also education. Education is a big one, and I think we need to tack on adding software development boot camps to the mix, because software development boot camps were built out of necessity for the lack of talent in Silicon Valley, and a really accelerated, concentrated way of pushing forward the people who need to become technologically savvy to meet the needs of a financial technology alliance, because we lack a lot of technologists, and in the Caribbean, we have a lot of great points and a lot of guidance from the United Nations, but we need to build up the capacity to be able to build these things. And I think that's one of the things that is really holding us back. So if we could tack in that accelerated education aspect to it, I think it would be awesome. That's my last point. But,
very good, very
I'm really
good,
excited about this.
Great, thank you so much. So our international panelists, we have so far a question about the financial model, and from Mark, thinking about building talent, developing talent in software space. I would like to hear from you later, but first, Martin, can we hear from your perspective?
Yeah, sure. So, the interesting thing is that while fintechs have the biggest opportunities to impact our region, we're usually the smallest startups, at least in the beginning. And when we're the small startups having to now go not just against the banks, but wanting to work with the banks, it creates challenges. So I think this collection of voice, especially when you have other members that are not fintechs, that are, part of the banks, part of the governments, this creates this sort of extra confidence that the startups could have when, approaching these types of partners. So I agree that the major importance here is that voice of collection. There's not many startups in the Caribbean, and over the next 5 to 10 years, yes, we might get a few more, but we're likely to see more consolidation. So you really have to think about, how do you empower the little fintechs that you have in this region? And I could count on my fingers right now, um, to go against these institutions that see us as competition, quite frankly, while we need them as well. So I think being or having this association come together to, voice these concerns, basically group up together to not just battle against these hurdles, but find different ways to go about it will definitely help us. Things like hackathons, accelerators, getting the right agencies, central banks on board. Imagine a 1 week hackathon, you bring fintechs together. I'm sure you could create some innovative products within a very short time. Us fintechs are able to move quite quickly. It's actually faster to create a new product than to maintain an existing one. So these are the types of opportunities we have to empower us as fintechs by coming together, not just as competitors, but as people who just want or have a vision to continue innovating. We understand that we have to put the competition aside sometimes, and just work together to get something that we could all benefit from.
Very well. Thank you so much, Martin. So our international panelists, we have 3 questions. I mean, Martin also brought this aspect that in the Caribbean in particular, and I'm not too sure if in African countries or in Malawi in particular, the banks are as resistant as in the Caribbean to work with the fintech, but in the Caribbean, it has been a big issue. So maybe if you can share your perspective, William, on this aspect of the collaboration with the banks, and also Sarah and Bram, your perspective on the other topics we have covered. So maybe starting with William on this area.
Thank you, Annie. I work for a bank, so you can actually see the difference, the issue, the issue there. I work for a bank, but I've actually been involved in a number of things that are not bank related. But let me say this. When you look at the association and coming together, it is for the common good and not necessarily for competition. There is time to compete and there is time to collaborate. I think that distinction has to be made. So if you are choosing leaders to be on the board, scrutinize them and look at those that can be able to accept the ideals of collaboration, and those that can, for one moment, just put aside the competition bit. So in Malawi, banks started the move. The bank started a key move because banks came together and formed the National Switch. And I was privileged to be the chair of that establishment of National Switch. After the switch was set up, we invited all that are participating in the DFA space to be part of the switch. Now, when that was done, that on the other side, we were pushing for all those collaborations and all those working groups that we were together. So it was something that banks in Malawi have realized that to achieve inclusion, you would want to come together and not compete on certain things. If you want to influence policy, for instance, you can't do it as an individual. So there are commonalities that need to be put in place and agreed, and the people that you would want to put in the board, in the leadership positions, make sure that there are people that are not or are pro collaboration, other than those that would advance their personal goals for the organizations. That's what I could comment for now. Thank you.
Very well. Sarah, over to you.
Well, let me first say, if all of the people running associations were like William, I think my job would be a lot easier. So just going to give William credit there for his open-mindedness and the way, quite clearly under his leadership, collaboration is, really high on the agenda. And that's really important to get the right. As William said, I echo that. Coming back to, there were a number of questions, so I'm going to rattle through as many as I can while I've got time. So funding. At the beginning, the seed funding to get associations started, there are typically three sources of income. One, grant. So William and the team in Malawi, it was UNCDF. And I noticed that there's also an offer for that in the Caribbean, which is great. The other option is industry sponsorship. So quite often fintech associations it's 5 or 6 founders come together, think it's a great idea, and they put their hand in their own pocket and invest in the starting of an association. Or sometimes you can get industry sponsors as well. And the third option in some areas, such as Singapore Fintech Association, their initial seed funding come from their central bank. But I think that third option is quite scarce. There's not too many of those. In terms of long-term funding, key areas would include things like membership fees, sponsorship fees, grants and project funding as well to deliver certain projects, and also events. Big festivals and conferences tend to bring good income as well. So those are the key main long-term income strategies for the associations. The tipping point we see of success is when you employ one full-time person to run the association. While people are doing it as a part-time job, they are putting their heart and soul in, but they often have another full-time job elsewhere that has to take priority sometimes. That's paying the salary. So you do really need one full-time person with reasonable knowledge about digital finance and fintech running the association. So an administrator is not necessarily enough by itself. We have, if you look to Singapore Fintech Association, they have about 25 staff. I think they're one of the largest out there. On average, we see somewhere between 3 and 6 people running associations, particularly when they're running it well with many different activities. In terms of talent, we are actually building out a project. It's run in Mauritius, and we're trying to replicate in other locations where we work with local universities and place graduates in fintechs and digital finance to try and make sure we're solving the skill gap between coming out and graduating from university and school with the right skills to go into these jobs, but also understanding what it's like to be working fintech, digital finance, and also creating more entrepreneurs who can maybe even bypass the whole employment situation and launch straight in and start their own fintech. So there's definitely things that we have in place for talent. And I truly see that fintech, any kind of association, fintech or digital finance associations, can play a really interesting role as an innovation hub. So things like having accelerator programs, hackathons, networking events, attracting VC funders, bringing in the regulator, really playing that role to accelerate growth of fintech. And we have another proposal that we're hoping to attract funding for various members to be able to support that. So if those two projects around becoming an innovation kind of accelerator hub and a talent hub, we've already got ideas on that we'd be delighted to share with the association. So yeah, I think that ticks most of the boxes of the questions.
Very well, Sarah. Thank you. Bram, anything else to add?
No, I think, and also being mindful of time, I think most of it was already covered by the other speakers, but I think, and it's something that was mentioned in the chat, actually, one of the main challenges that I think what you really need to think through right from the get-go is like, okay, we can as a development partner, we can support you in let's say the first steps, but right from the get-go, think about like what is your long-term sustainability strategy, like how do you look at revenue streams, and it's not revenue in the largest sense of or the widest sense of the word. So think of indeed memberships fees, as I give an example from Uganda, but Sarah also mentioned other sources of revenue and like events and those kind of things. I think is really, really important because development funds are not infinite, and so it's good to get you started, but use that wisely, that period that you get with that, to think through what is your long-term strategy to get yourself fully established, not only from a legal way. I think the legal thing is actually the easy part, though some people think it's a really hard part, but the legal aspect is actually the easy part. What the challenge comes thereafter.
Very well. Thank you so much. So we have.
Can I just add one thing quickly to what Bram said? Sorry to interrupt, but I think it's really crucial that grant funding and seed funding, donor funding can be really important, but actually membership fees and sponsorship are only going to be paid if you're adding value to industry. So there's, you need to be very laser focused on what value you're bringing to your members, what value to bring to the ecosystem in the industry, because that is what's going to generate the next round of funding. And we should never be, to me, the operations of the day-to-day operations should be covered by industry, whether that's membership fees, sponsorship fees, event type income. And we should actually focus on using, grants and donor funds for particular projects, like a project on digital financial literacy, or like, firstly, maybe establishing, this innovation hub or talent hub that we want to talk about. It should be projects coming in, but the key day-to-day running of the association should be covered by fees from its members and the industry it's supposed to be serving. Because if you're not serving them, you're not getting the income, you're not really doing a great job. That would be my very practical advice.
Mm-hmm. Very well. So I think we are out of time, but there was an interesting question in the chat about the consumer protection and how is the association getting involved in supporting consumers. I don't know if we have one closing remark. I will ask everybody on the panel who wants to say a final word briefly, and perhaps just one mention on this aspect. So with me and Imran, Martin, any closing remarks, or our international panelists, because we'll close. No, nothing to mention.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think Annie, the document you soft launched last, I believe, two weeks ago. I'll reiterate what I said in the call, is it really does serve as a Bible of sorts to what we can, it's as a North Star as to what we can focus on. And yeah, I agree. I think what Sarah mentioned, another big step we could do is figuring out what's the value that could really bring members of the association together and align so that they feel like they're getting the most out of it, and then start to take next steps forward to that. I'm ready to move, and I'm sure everyone else on the
Very well.
call is as well. So yeah, I just want to
Thank
say
you so much.
This is a great idea.
Right. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for your time. Thank you very much. That was extremely useful. Thanks for sharing your experience with us. We will reach out to you again. Hopefully, everyone, if you have want to nominate yourself in the Caribbean, the link I think was in the chat. So we do have the call for nominations open until the 1st of October. So let's think it through, who wants to get involved, and hopefully we can work together and make it work in the Caribbean region. So on that note, thanks everyone and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye bye, colleagues. Cheers.
Bye.